Mayor Carmen Yulin Cruz, thanks for joining me on UpFront. It's been 5 months since Hurricane Maria devastated the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico, where you're the mayor of the capital city, San Juan. Right now, what, in your view, is the single biggest challenge for people living on that island? How bad is the situation there still?
First of all, Mehdi, thank you very much for the opportunity to continue to update the viewers in the United States and around the world. Right now, the aftermath of Maria has, if I had to summarize it, has contributed to a social meltdown. Suicide rates have gone up. Crime is at the same level that it was before Maria, which was at a high level. Still, about 30% of the population does not have any electricity. We have towns in the inner side of the island that have no electricity whatsoever. And the reconstruction and transformation of Puerto Rico does not seem to get off the ground. We have been granted $4.9 billion in a loan by the government of the United States. We haven't gotten 1 single cent of that loan. So we are looking at, in the next months, a deepening of a social crisis that was there before Maria, but that definitely was widened and much more aggressive after Maria.
You said, you said at the start, thank you for the opportunity to update the world and US viewers. Do you feel in Puerto Rico that you've been abandoned by the world, abandoned by the US? Because you're not a US state, but you are an unincorporated US territory. The 3.5 million people who live there are US citizens. Do you feel abandoned by the US government? How would you judge the current US government response to this social meltdown in Puerto Rico?
The US government response has been inadequate, has been inefficient, and has been inappropriate. And there has been some people in the Trump administration that have been, I would say, honest enough that they have admitted to that. But the American people have been very upfront, have been very open-hearted, and the world. So we have to make a very big differentiation between the Trump administration, which will now say that they're dumping millions of dollars in Puerto Rico. And what we want to make sure the American people know is that we haven't received that money. That transformation has not taken place.
So US government agencies and institutions were widely criticized for their handling of Puerto Rico's crisis. A UN rights expert even said, quote, "We can't fail to note the dissimilar urgency and priority given to the emergency response in Puerto Rico compared to the US states affected by hurricanes in recent months." Do you believe Puerto Rico was treated differently, unfairly, and if so, why?
Most definitely. And it's not only my belief, but it's a widespread belief of the people of Puerto Rico. I think probably it had to do a little bit because of ignorance. It was also an issue of putting standard operating procedures into a different circumstance and not being able to adapt and overcome. That was one thing. Two, when that happened, there was a stubborn streak in the Trump administration, led by President Trump himself, that everything was okay, that this was a good news story. And they continued to do everything they could in order to ensure that this was a good news story. There were even some emails written by the Pentagon stating that we continue to have a lot of difficulty making sure that this story is perceived as a good news story. And they even named me as one of the reasons why they weren't able to produce that.
Just sticking with the actual relief effort, do you think Texas, Louisiana, Florida got more help from the US government, from the federal government, more attention from the US media and the wider US public than the people of Puerto Rico? Because Puerto Ricans are Latin, they're in the Caribbean, they're residents of a former colony. Do you think prejudice played a role? Racism even?
Well, we are a colony of the United States. When all the decisions that are important to you are made by the Congress of the United States. I wish I didn't have to say this because it is very strong, but we are a colony of the United States.
I'm wondering about motivations. Are you saying when President Trump and his colleagues look at Puerto Rico, are they looking at Puerto Ricans as a different type of people to the people who live in Florida, Texas, Louisiana? That's what I'm wondering is your view.
Most definitely. And the botched effort and their continued strategy of saying we're doing a great job, it's there. Look, right now, and I'll use the municipality of San Juan. We used $21 million of the municipality of San Juan in order to ensure that we were prepared for both hurricanes Irma and Maria. We still have not gotten $11.2 million reimbursement back from FEMA. This is the largest municipality in Puerto Rico. This is repeating itself throughout the entire island nation of Puerto Rico. And what that does is that it hinders the municipality and the city's ability to provide essential services like medicine, providing medicine to people.
So just to be clear then and to clarify, you're saying that the US government's botched response, what you call botched response to Hurricane Maria and the situation in Puerto Rico was affected by racism on the part of the Trump administration towards Puerto Rico?
It could be affected by racism. It could be affected by ignorance. It could be affected by the inability to adapt standard operating procedures because there was no sense of urgency. And there still seems to be no sense of urgency. If you approve a $4.9 billion loan in November and you still haven't given 1 cent for the recovery, there's no sense of urgency there.
After you publicly criticized the US government's relief efforts, President Donald Trump attacked you on Twitter and suggested you were a politically motivated ingrate with poor leadership. You responded by calling him unfit to lead. Why do you think he came after you personally like that? Were you surprised to see those tweets?
No, you know, that's the way the president deals with people that tell the truth. And this is not about me. This is not about the president of the United States. We happen to have the cameras in front of us. So we had an opportunity and he had an opportunity to lead. He had an opportunity to say, look, we haven't done what is right. We haven't done enough. But then he decided to grade himself and give himself a 10 out of a 10. I've said this and I will continue to say it. If you are a leader and you grade yourself in a humanitarian crisis and you are utterly satisfied, well, 5 months into it, 30% of the Puerto Rican population still does not have electricity. And I mean, you need to regrade yourself.
Clearly, President Trump has issues with honesty and ego, but you produced some pretty inflammatory language in the aftermath of that hurricane. You suggested that the federal government's failure to provide food, water, and the rest could amount to, quote, genocide. Looking back now, that was an absurd thing to say, was it not?
No, it was not. If you're a Puerto Rican,
you think the Trump administration was deliberately trying to kill the people of Puerto Rico?
And you know,
that's what a genocide is, the deliberate killing of a people.
I think that what they did, no, believe me, I know what a genocide is. And to quote myself properly, what I said, that it would amount to almost something similar to genocide. And I would still say that. 500,000 people have left Puerto Rico. 30% of our population. We don't want electricity to have air conditioning. We want electricity to be able to operate in hospitals without having to use the lights in our cell phones. We want electricity to be able to have our children go to school on a normal day and not on a part-time basis as we're doing right now. We want electricity to be able to jumpstart our economy, to depend less on what we are given and to do more unto ourselves.
Even before the hurricane hit, Puerto Rico was in the midst of a major financial crisis. Nearly half the population lived under the poverty line. The unemployment rate was tripled that of the US. The island was $73 billion in debt. It declared bankruptcy last summer. Before becoming mayor of San Juan, you yourself served in Puerto Rico's House of Representatives for 4 years. How much responsibility should the island's political class, yourself included, take for the dire economic situation in Puerto Rico, even before the hurricane hit?
Oh, we need to own up to our own mistakes. And I've said that over and over. That's why I say we need to just use this opportunity to transform the way that we look at things, to transform the way that we do things, to depend less in what is sent in the matter of help from outside and to do more for unto ourselves. This is why I continue to ask anyone that would listen, we need to be able to build, for example, solar panels in Puerto Rico. So anyone out there listening, come to San Juan, we will make it worth your while. But we also need to ensure that the monies that are coming are not monies used only to hire companies from the US that come to Puerto Rico, but to hire locally so that the money stays in locally and that we can revamp our economy, we need to be able to plug into the world economy.
You've been a very outspoken critic of the governor and the Puerto Rican government's plans to privatize power companies and infrastructure in the wake of the hurricane. But what's your alternative to privatization? It's all very well saying, let's not privatize. But given the dire economic situation Puerto Rico is in, what would you be doing instead if you were governor?
I'm not the governor. I'm the mayor of the city of San Juan. But you don't have to be the governor to be able to have an opinion, right? So there's two areas that have to do with electricity: the generation and the transmission. The transmission areas is now being rebuilt completely, and it's been updated, but it's been updated to fossil fuel. So we need to continue to have very specific targets and goals to transform and generate a lot more of our energy from solar energy, from the wind, and from the ocean. Desalination plants in order to get our water.
Okay, one final question, Mayor Cruz. Do you have plans to run for Puerto Rico's governorship yourself in 2020 to make some of this stuff that you're talking about happen? Some of your critics say that's why you've been so outspoken in recent months, to boost your political profile.
I have said that this is not the time for political calculations. This is a time for
So you're not ruling it out?
We have a real issue in Puerto Rico with crime, and we have to have some very difficult conversations about the future of the status of Puerto Rico, but about how we transform and how do we make sure that we move forward from this humanitarian and economic crisis.
Carmen Yulin Cruz, thank you very much for joining me on UpFront.
Thank you for the opportunity.